Started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCI Live 2026. This is What to Expect from Your Market Study with Patrick Shabram from G2G Analytics. We're going to get into the session with Patrick in just a minute. I just want to take a second to thank, and this is the wrong, to thank our champion sponsors, Frontier Cooperative, Cabot Creamery Co-op, and National Co-op Grocers for making this series truly possible and possible to be free for everyone and anyone who wants to access it and build cooperatively. So, we're here today to talk to Patrick about what to expect from your market study. And what some people have asked me is like, don't you already have a market study session? And I am excited to answer that question, which is we have actually have FCI has a guide to what to do with your market study once you get it. Patrick has done a session for us about thinking about what to ask in your market study. But what we kept hearing from startups was, okay, we know what to ask and we know who to interview, and then we get a market study, and then this thing shows up, and we go, what's this? And what does it contain? What can we expect from it? And so sometimes people have expectations of it that is not actually what it can provide. Sometimes it provides things they didn't expect that are really helpful. People don't know what to expect from it when it arrives. And so that's what Patrick's here to talk with us about today is what do we expect from this thing, the market feasibility study specifically. And so I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, JQ, and thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody who is here today. And there should be plenty of time for questions at the end. I am going to give an overview of market feasibility studies and what to expect from the market feasibility studies. Um, oops, if There, now I can forward. I do want to give just a little bit of information about me. First of all, I should mention that G2G Analytics is a Columinate consultant. I represent both G2G Analytics and work with Columinate. It is about me in particular. I am a location research consultant. So this is my job, actually doing an analysis of different markets and locations within the markets. And this is something that I first started doing I first started studying and doing geographic research in 1997, and I did location analyses starting in 1999. In 2016 is when I really started market studies, although I started working with a colleague in 2015 who had been working with food co-ops. So I've continued to work with food co-ops and small community-minded independent grocers since that time. I work both with startups and with established co-ops. So the last few years, I've had a lot of focus on startups, but by working with established co-ops, it does give me insight into our market studies, making informed decisions as far as market studies that I present to startup organizations. So, why do you need a market study in the first place? First of all, you need to make informed decisions, and this is what a market study is going to do. It's going to help you make informed decisions regarding your market, regarding the sales potential within your market. And devastating mistakes can be avoided. Putting your store in the wrong site, in the wrong location, can have a devastating effect on the viability of the store. And it's not a change that is not a mistake that's easy to fix. You can't necessarily pick up your store and move it somewhere else very easily, especially as a startup. Uh, if you're going to perform a pro forma, a financial feasibility study, you're going to need a market study. The market study is a starting point from which the people working with your pro forma are going to start from. And almost inevitably, I think I know of one time where somebody was able to actually get financing without doing a market study. And I've actually been contacted by financial institutions before on behalf of their clients because they weren't going to loan money until their client actually got a market study. And then a lot of times with larger grants, I know that there are smaller grants that will actually help you through some of your technical development, but larger grants that might be around developing the store or building the store Sometimes they will require market studies as well too. So eventually you're going to need a market study. I also do want to just point out here to make a distinction. G2G has another product that's referred to as a preliminary market assessment that a number of people working with FCI have gotten from us. This is not a full market study, but it's essentially a preliminary proof of concept for your market. This is essentially taking a look at your trade area as a whole, your market as a whole, and saying, yes, moving forward with a store of a such and such size makes sense in your particular market and should produce somewhere in the neighborhood of this range of dollars, um, assuming everything goes well within that. And that's a great starting point for organizations, but it should never replace a full market study. And I have seen startup groups try and do exactly that. Go with a preliminary market assessment and view that as a viable substitute for a market study, and it's simply not. It's really designed to be a proof of concept. Now, about the market feasibility study itself, there are a few things that will be included in your market study. Okay, first of all, define trade area. Um, there's a little graphic you see down here, a little map that's got some red boundaries. I can't make it bigger because this is actually a trade area for a client, and there's some confidentiality that we have to keep in mind. But this is an example of a trade area. It's basically what part of the market is going to represent the most sales for your store. In other words, about anywhere from 60 to 90% of your store sales are going to come from a geographic region that's closer to your store. And that's what a trade area
And
is
if I
going
can
to
jump
be,
in for a second, Patrick,
sure.
on that, I think people don't realize sometimes it's not intuitive. And that's what's so amazing when Patrick and other market analysts do the work is like, I've seen some market analysts just draw a circle around your store, run, scream, because what they're analyzing is the directions people will shop, where they'll come from, what they won't cross, what they won't do. And so sometimes it's much bigger than you expect, and sometimes it's much smaller than you expect. I just wanted to point out that a lot of people are like, well, can't we just draw a circle and figure out what our trade area is, or can't we choose our trade area? And I was wondering if you could just speak to that for a moment, that that's not really how it works.
It's not really how it works, right? You can't really choose your trade area. A lot of times, different economic development coordinators or chambers of commerce may give you data on a city or the downtown area. And a lot of times, like you said, they'll draw a circle, a 6 mile circle or a 3 mile circle, and provide you all the data within that. But that's not really what defines a trade area. What defines a trade area is where people are most likely to gravitate towards your store. There may be barriers, there may be rivers that people aren't crossing, or there may be highways that people generally don't, um, uh, that people have a perception of being sort of a different neighborhood and not a place where people go. There may be competitors in your market that may shorten the size of your trade area because people probably aren't going to drive past the competitor to get to your store, at least not the majority of them. So a trade area, there are quite a bit. Oh, and then demographic, basically, where do the people who have the greatest propensity to shop at your store live within your market, right? That may actually extend the size of your trade area, where you may find that there's a neighborhood that has a certain profile or lacks maybe you're looking to open a natural foods co-op and there isn't one in this neighborhood, and you may find that you actually get a greater level of number of shoppers that actually come from that particular area. So there's all sorts of things that go into a trade area. Of course, distance is one, but absolutely you can't just draw a ring around your store and say this is the trade area. That's really not how it works. Huh. All right. Now, um, aside from a defined trade area, there will be a sales forecast. That sales forecast should be a fairly definitive number, meaning that it should not be a ballpark range. It should be a number that says if you open a store here, we anticipate your first year sales will be this number of dollars, right? Um, Usually a couple of years worth of numbers to sort of give you a pretty clear understanding of what the market is suggesting is the sales potential within the particular market. Okay. Um, and that should be on a segmented basis, meaning that the forecast itself should have been created using a breakdown of the market, not just a 6 mile ring, not just the city in general, but essentially should have been developed under a census tract by census tract analysis, since we're talking about food stores. And I'll explain what a census tract here is here in a little bit. A review of your competitive environment. Okay. And if you're considering any sites, an assessment of the site and facility characteristics. Okay? Now, I know that there are other consultants that will also advise you on the site and the facility, but in order to make an appropriate sales forecast, there needs to be an understanding of what the site characteristics are and whether or not those help or impede your ability to essentially build your sales potential. And then some location characteristics. Now, I'm going to make a distinction here between site and location. Location is a general area, so we could be talking about an intersection. We could be talking about the west side of a downtown area. We could be talking about a particular central neighborhood that is going to be your location, whereas a site is going to be that physical piece of property on which your store would actually be existing. So we make this distinction between the two and provide you with information on both. And then this should all be included in a final report. And that final report should include the major findings and recommendations. And there will be some recommendations based on that. And sometimes those may be locational recommendations if you're looking for a location. It should include sales forecast, um, characteristics about your trade area, uh, a review of what we found with the competitive environment, and methodology, detailed methodology. That's important. So if somebody is just giving you some numbers and not telling you how to get to those numbers, please don't, I mean, please ask for that because it is important. Now, there are three basic methodologies that are used for most market studies, by the way, that the three most common methodologies that are used, because at the end of the day, we're coming up with sales numbers for a store that doesn't exist, right? So how do we actually come up with these sales figures? One way that we use it is what's known as an analog model. Analogous. We're basically looking at situations that are similar within your particular market. So basically, an analog model will use extensive data from existing stores, okay, existing markets, to help inform the sales potential for the market in question. Now, that doesn't mean that we're looking at the trade areas. What we're looking at is we're looking at sales performance segmented within that market, right? So that there's been some research, there's been lots of data, and that we're able to sort of take different segments of your market, find similar situations, and from there make some informed decisions about how your store should be performing in your unique market. So we're not saying your market is like such and such market. Here are the dollar values that you should get. We're basically breaking your market up into pieces, finding existing examples of those pieces, and then piecing together a sales forecast using actual real life data. A gravity model is a model that tries to establish food expenditures in a given market. So let's say you have a market and that market spends $30 million on natural foods. And the gravity model will essentially say if you open your store, how many of those dollars will gravitate towards your store? In other words, where will that money go within that market, assuming that there's sort of a finite amount of sales that exists within your particular market. A survey is kind of the third way that it's done, and I've seen this called several different models, um, and it basically entails asking shopper what their habits are, what they would do if the store was to open up in your market. Okay. And I'm just going to risk maybe hopefully not offending anybody, but I'm going to risk that a little bit. If you're a person who has really thought that, oh, a survey would be the way to go. I've seen these come and go. I've seen people basically say, well, why hasn't anybody thought of this before? And they have. They just don't use them because they're often the most expensive and almost always the least reliable way to go. It seems like a great idea. Let's just ask people if they would shop at your store or how much they would spend at your store if the store was open. And that is notoriously unreliable because it's easy. It doesn't cost you anything to say that you're gonna shop somewhere, but when it comes time to actually start separating yourself from your dollars, it the people don't always follow through with what they said that they're going to do. Right? Visit your store, find that you don't have the kind of cereal that their kids really like, or that they're just too much in the habit of shopping at the other store, or they're just too used to it, or they like the cashiers, whatever may be the reason. Inevitably, what people say they're going to do in this regards and what they actually end up doing quite commonly don't always match. So it's important that I point this out because I do find that this can get a lot of groups into trouble down the road with unreliable market studies. Now, G2G Analytics utilizes the analog methodology. Um, uh, in large part because this is based off of real world performance, right? This is not a hypothetical. I mean, we're not using hypothetical data here. What we're doing is we're looking at existing stores. This is the type of methodology that large chain stores would use in sort of determining where the sales performance within different stores because they've got access to that data. We've over the years built up a database of food co-ops, and so we're able to apply the same kind of methodology. And our market studies start with gathering some basic information about the intentions for your store. So we'll ask some preliminary questions. What's the initial size that you're thinking about? Although we'll make a recommendation within the market study. What are your preliminary plans? Are you looking for a conventional food store? Are you talking natural foods? Who do you think your competitors are within your market? Is there anything we should know about the operations? Are you planning to have a large cafe as part of your store? These are things that will help sort of inform us as we move into the market study. Then we define a preliminary, and I say preliminary trade area within that. And then we do field work. Okay? And field work is an essential part of this particular market study. If you're working with anybody that says they can do a market study without doing field work, um, please consider a different vendor. Field work is necessary in order to better understand the market. And while we're in the field, we evaluate the market area and we'll further refine the trade area. We're going to look at access patterns, how the roads are. If you have any sites in mind, what are the major streets that would get people to and from those sites or to and from your competitors? We're going to evaluate the facility site and location characteristics if you have any proposed sites. Now, you don't need any proposed sites to do a market study. And sometimes we can sort of give you some options as far as where you might consider as far as locations are concerned. But if you do have any sites, we can take that into consideration. Yeah. Identify and evaluate any relevant competitors, and then we're going to also look at retail synergy. Are people going to your store, other stores in your vicinity, within your neighborhood? Okay. All of this data is essentially is we come back to our office and we evaluate all the preliminary and field data, And as I mentioned before, we've developed a database. So we've studied penetration levels at over 100 food co-ops, and we have developed a database of trade area census tracts and the average sales in each of those census tracts. So what we will do is we will basically take each census tract within your particular trade area, and we will look within our database to see how census tracts with similar store characteristics, similar competitive characteristics, similar demographic characteristics perform. And since we know the sales penetration levels, we can essentially apply those sales penetration levels to that particular census tract. Okay. In other words, what we're doing is we're not doing a forecast for your store. We're doing a sales forecast for each census tract within your market, within your trade area. So we're basically sort of doing, um, depending upon how many census tracts, we could be doing anywhere from um, 5 to 30 different little mini forecasts within your trade area to establish what the sales level would be out of each census tract. And once we have estimated sales per capita, we just times that by the population, sum all that together, and then we look at sales from beyond the trade area. So is your store in a tourist town? Is your store right along a major highway? Is it in a neighborhood center? These may all determine what might be the sales that apply from beyond the trade area. And what's the population concentration, right? Um, and then finally, we apply maturity rates. So when we do a sales forecast, we are using existing stores. Your store is not an existing store. When your store will open, it will take several years for people to discover your store, to try your store, to start getting in the habit of going to your store. So you will not be working like an existing store for the first few years. And so we'll apply those maturity rates, and that will equal your first year sales forecast. And we can, from there, we can calculate second, third, and we usually give 4 years worth of sales forecast within that. I'm just going to say that this model requires constant updates to our database and ongoing study of existing stores. So when you successfully open your food co-op sometime in the future, I may be asking for your help to essentially help us inform other people's studies in the future. Now, I mentioned to you that I would let you know what a census tract is. I live in Loveland, Colorado. I just put together this map real quickly just so you can kind of get a sense. You all live in a census tract. You just don't know what census tract you live in. Zip codes, if anybody's trying to do a sales forecast for zip codes, my map here shows you 2 zip codes, but a whole bunch of census tracts. Zip codes is not a refined enough form of research. What we're doing is we're looking at each census tract within that. As an example, 1706 on this map has much more competition around it than you might find in, say, 1707, right? So that's part of what we take a look at when we are looking at your stores. We're breaking this down into the census tract level. Now, when you actually, you might find that any sites that you referred to us may not be viable options. There may be a few years between when you get the initial market study, and you may find that your numbers are need to be updated. Um, you may There may be changes in competitive environments, right? So we can do updates, and those updates are usually done at a significantly reduced price. It sort of depends upon how much time has passed between the original market study and the update. But it's usually much cheaper to eventually come back and do an update to your market study. Um, and we can usually do that without field work if we can reasonably assess a site. So using Google Earth, or sometimes I've had clients go take pictures for me, or I would be open to FaceTime as you walk around the site and let me know. Let me take a look at it. But the idea being that I might not have to do the field work. There are exceptions. There are times when the site is not accessible remotely. Say, for example, if you're in an urban market and want to open a store that's going to have all the parking in a garage type setting, that might be an instance where maybe it's an abbreviated field trip. Okay. Maybe
Can I just clarify
literally,
there in case anyone misheard? Field study is essential for the original market study, right? This
yeah.
is just for the update. Okay.
Yes, thank you. This is just for the update. Yes, it is essential. But if it is an update and we can reasonably assess the site, if a site is in mind, or if it's a competitor and it's a competitor that we know well, something like Natural Grocers or Whole Foods. If it's a competitor that we don't know well, then there might need to be a visit to the store. Um, a a market study that's older than 6 years, though, really should be replaced.
And
So,
that's generous. That's not what FCI is going to say. It depends on your market, but right, but because
yeah,
how people are eating is changing so rapidly, most lenders we know will not approve a loan on a market study for that is the basis of a pro forma that is more than 3 years old for your exact site.
yeah. Yeah, we're going to tell you, and it is true, right? If you're in a rural market and there's been no changes to access and no new stores have come in during that time, and there hasn't been a lot of population growth, um, it's not as important to get the new market study over a certain period of time. But yes, um, um, absolutely, a new market study is the way to go after a certain period of time. What not to expect. Okay, I think this is just as helpful as what to expect. First of all, we're not doing a pro forma in your market study. Okay, I want to be clear of that. That's the one thing that I think a lot of people that I always need to be upfront about. We are not. We are doing the sales potential. We are not figuring in anything as far as the cost of the site or the cost of doing business. Okay. Um, we are not doing a department by department breakdown of your store. We are assuming that your store is going to be like other food co-ops. We will make adjustments um, based upon what we know about your store. And so we can make adjustments, or we can try and match it with other stores. Let's say your store isn't planning to sell beer and wine. We may look at other stores in our database that also don't sell beer and wine, and that may help us make informed decisions. But by and large, we're anticipating that the departments and the mix is going to be similar to like stores with similar products. Okay. And we don't make recommendations on specific sites. We're not talking with realtors. We don't know what the cost of that site's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be viable or not. So we were going to give you sales forecast numbers, and those sales forecast numbers should help you know whether or not a site is viable or not. And in some cases, I know clients that might find that, they had us assess three different sites, and the site with the lowest sales volume might make the most sense because it actually is the store that it would be easiest to open, assuming that it's not prohibitive to the long-term success of your store. Yeah. But just keep in mind that this is a market study, not a store study. So we are focused on your market. We are not focused on the store itself, even if we are giving you sales forecasts for your numbers. Okay. There are other professionals that will help with that part. Essentially taking the sales potential that we're providing for you and maximizing the sales potential within that. Okay. So, when are you ready for our market feasibility study? And again, eventually you're going to need one. Okay. The time to consider a market study is when you need a pro forma. Okay. Because this is going to be an essential piece in order for you to develop your pro forma. If you're considering specific sites or locations, then a market study is you're at the point that a market study is going to be needed. Okay. If You need to assess different parts of your market to determine what might be the best area to open. So I've had people that basically say, we want to open a food co-op in such and such area, and we want to be on the east side of town. But the east side of town is a large geographical area, and you're not sure where within that town you want to open the store. We can advise you on where you might maximize sales, or we can advise you on where you might achieve what it is that you want to achieve with the store, right? Sometimes it's not always about having the highest sales performance. It might be about trying to serve an underserved population. But within that underserved population, you also want to position the store so that it has the greatest opportunity for success, because if the store isn't successful, your underserved population will be underserved once again if the store ends up having to close. Yeah. If you're applying for a loan, market studies are almost always needed. That's always when I get the, can you do a market study right now? Kind of things, is when people get to the point that they're applying for a loan and then they realize that they need a market study in order to get that. Or if you're applying for a large grant. If you need a business plan as part of that large grant, and that business plan requires some sort of pro forma or some sort of um, sales estimate, sales forecasting, then that's when you actually need your market study. Okay. As you get closer to opening the store, if you're in the process of negotiating a lease, or there's been some change in your market, a major competitor has opened, then that's time to do an update. So you will want to do an update to your market study when you reach that particular point. So, how am I doing on? Okay, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Okay, so that's what to expect from your market study in a nutshell. Hopefully, I covered everything that without sort of dumping too much information on you all at once. But here's my contact information. I'm always happy to talk with you one-on-one. Um, you also G2G or you can find me on the Colluminates website. But I am more than happy to answer questions right now.
We've got one or two questions already, and I may ask you to go back to a couple of slides because a couple places I'm like, I have questions.
Okay,
But the
sure.
first one was really good. I was about trade area, and they said, when you're considering a trade area and just doing this whole process, are you considering? And there were three things. So there's three pieces to
Okay.
this. Do you consider state boundaries? Do you consider tourism? Do you consider snowbirds?
Yes, yes, and yes. Okay, so what's the first one? Tourism?
State boundaries. That's
Oh,
one I didn't know the answer to.
state boundaries. Yeah, we find people don't have too much problem crossing state lines. I would think that people are less likely to cross a major freeway or to cross a large river than they are to cross a state boundary. So I don't really find state boundaries as being an issue, unless there's
Mhm.
some sort of um, tax issue that comes in mind. But even then, if people like your store, especially with the food co-op, co-ops have larger trade areas than traditional grocery stores. Part of
Mm.
that is people have a greater sense of loyalty to the food co-op. And so I've found that really doesn't have quite as much impact. Um, Snowbird, what was the second one? Tourism?
Tourism and snowbirds, basically those fluctuating populations.
Those don't affect the trade area. Let me take back that. I don't want to say yes on that. They don't affect the trade area so much. They would more affect the beyond trade area sales.
Okay.
So sales that come from beyond the trade area.
But that is factored in, right? Like I know, like
Yeah.
our store, my home co-op is Common Ground Food Co-op in Urbana, Illinois, and when I was the general manager there, was working with your colleague Debbie Swasuna, and our population is vastly higher,
Yeah.
two-thirds of the year than the other half, and that was something that she obviously factored in all of this. So those population fluctuations, I'm assuming, are something you guys do look at as you're thinking through the sales.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We absolutely look at those fluctuations in population. And it's not an easy thing to do too, because we're getting demographic information, we're getting population. And the question is the seasonal population part of the actual population numbers that
Mhm.
come out of each census tract, or are people listing where they live the other 6 months out of the year, the other seasons without it out of the year? So they're not necessarily there are things that we can look at to try and determine that, but sometimes we actually work with a data provider to with our data to try and get as accurate number as possible. But we will make adjustments to those numbers based on what we see. And sometimes that's where it helps to talk with some economic development coordinators or other people that work within the city or the town to sort of see how the population fluctuates from one part of the year toward the other part of the year. So they will be figured into the sales forecast, but not necessarily into the trade area. We might not necessarily make the trade area larger because you're a tourist destination. We're just going to say a greater percent of your sales would come from beyond the trade area. Okay, so
Okay.
especially on that tourism piece. So,
And for what it's worth, I mean, you again, there's multiple forms different providers use, whether it's analog or gravity, but in food co-ops, it is not uncommon. We have a lot of food co-ops that especially have like they have a summer tourism and that is literally three-quarters of their sales.
yeah.
And things like that. So this is not an uncommon thing. Actually, a lot of food co-ops are located in places that have very uneven sales seasons. So it's something that is in the database, I would assume, because you guys are working with
Exactly.
them.
Yeah, keep in mind that what we're doing is we're trying to match you. So if you're in a highly touristy area, we would also be looking at other stores in highly touristy areas to help inform us on what your store performance should be.
And it's something that's interesting. I think as a layperson looking at market studies, like there are food co-ops in towns that have a population of 5,000 and they do triple, not but double the sales my food co-op does. And there's ones that in populations of towns with populations of 5,000 that are doing a sliver of the sales that my food co-op is. And that was one of the interesting things I learned, when you guys were talking about market studies and I was working with you, like, wait a minute, how do you factor that? And that's where like, well, that one has a massive summer population. This one is not only isolated, doesn't have a tourism, but also has a larger city 20 minutes away that meets all the needs, and just those are those hidden factors. I just want to point them out for those of us who are new to this. I think they're almost like so intuitive to Patrick. Like there's these really interesting, massive things that may not seem like a big deal to us that can wildly transform the sales projections. People are asking if they can have your PowerPoint. I told them they'll get the video, and it's up to you if you want to share your PowerPoint.
I would be, if you want to send me an email for the PowerPoint, I'd be happy to send it to you.
So what I'm gonna say, guys, is if you want to, so you got Patrick's email here. You can email him. Um, at that address. We don't give out the email addresses of our registrants. It's one of the ways we respect your guys' information. But please do email him if you want the PowerPoint itself. You will get a link to the video on April 3rd on Friday. Yeah. So someone said Blue Hill, yeah. And Jennifer, you're one of the few people I'm going to ask to unmute if you don't mind.
Should
Jennifer's
I stop sharing?
yeah, it's great. Jennifer's with Blue Hill Food Co-op in Maine, and they are one of those big seasonal swing stores. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing for a second about that experience. And
Oh, there's so much I could speak on. What specifically would you like to know?
well, just like the fact that like it does really affect sales. Like when do most of your guys'
Yeah.
sales come in, and have you found market studies are accurate for you guys?
I think the market studies are pretty accurate. When we have management changeover, though, it is essential to be looking back to what were we doing a year ago,
Hmm.
for them to be able to know how to order, because without it, they'd be lost. Because ordering in January is going to at least times by five in August and September.
Wow,
So
times five.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah. And we go, we have fluctuations with staff as well. So this summer, we're probably going to have 100 staff. Right now, we're at 73. That's not huge, but it is considerable with onboarding and making sure people get good attention.
I just wanted to point to folks, thank you for humoring me. I apologize for being on the spot, that this is a
Anytime.
common experience in food co-ops. So, any provider of a market study that works consistently with food co-ops is absolutely going to understand how this works. But, as Patrick gave you a list of what you should expect in that, like, this is one of those questions, ask them. They should have an answer. Like,
Can I offer one more thing that
yeah.
it might be helpful? I'm not sure if it is or not. So my role here is ownership and outreach. I don't crunch the numbers, but I know of the needing to have a certain amount in our savings account at certain times of year, and we're banking on having that much so that we can borrow on it later. And so it's not a steady in any way. Every month has like, well, we need this much in the savings so that we can account for the loss at a different time. I don't know. And someone else can speak to that
Well,
more
and I'm going to pull us
eloquently,
back
but
from this topic, but Jennifer, you have just gotten yourself in trouble. I think next FCI Live we need a session on seasonal sales co-ops and what to expect if you're in a small
yes,
market.
I would love that. That'd be so much fun. Great idea. Thank
All right, you
you.
and I will connect. Thank you. So, other questions about the market study and what it can and can't do. You had a few slides, and that's why I was asking you to leave the slides up
Oh,
because I apologize, but
yeah.
there was like I know I'm going to forget, but there were one or two things on some of your slides where I was like, oh, let's talk about that some more. If you don't mind going
No, not at all.
back a slide or two here. Here. G2G market feasibility times to consider. Nope, back one more. Um, yeah. The study may recommend target locations. Okay, remember, so you should study your geographic market. Yeah, I don't know what not to expect. So I think I wanted to mention the department breakdown piece a little more with you, Patrick, because people,
Okay.
you may not know if you're in the early stages what that even means. And eventually, well before your store opens, but once you have a very clear idea of the size of the store, the location, like you have a pro forma, you have a market study, you're going to need to figure out how much of the sales do you think are going to be in each department because they're going to have different margins, they're going to have different amount of staff need and to really get more detailed about your business experience. So again, I just want to highlight that what reason Patrick's bringing it up is there will come a point you'll go, where's our department by department breakdown for that first year budget? That you're going to work with your support organization. If you're with National Coop Grocers as a store, if you join them, if you're working with Seven Roots, who might be helping you do your store design and store execution plan, but you're going to be working with a different provider. So again, you said what you offer. Like I'm talking about sales by sales, how much sales should go to vitamins, how much sales should go to produce, how much sales should go to grocery. Patrick's assumed you have those. But he's not necessarily going to assume how much focus you're going to put on each of those departments. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. So what we're doing is we're using existing stores to inform us on that. And as I mentioned, if we know that you're planning to have something different about your store, we can make adjustments or try and find a store that matches that or stores that match that to see what that might mean in the overall sales potential. But we simply don't have um, the data. I don't think you would want the expense of us basically doing a forecast on what would be every department within your store based upon your different markets within the area. So we're making certain assumptions about your product breakdown based on the size of your store. If it's going to be 1,000 square foot store, we're going to make some assumptions that maybe you would have a lot of perishables, that you're going to focus on a lot of those items that might be between trips to bigger stores. Let's say you're in a rural market and you're looking for a place for people to go in between that hour-long trip to a larger city. If you are planning to open a 10,000 square foot store, then we're going to assume that you pretty much have a complete list of all the different departments that you would find in a typical supermarket. From general grocery to meat, seafood, produce, you know, pet supplies, the whole works. So
So the good question in the chat, I think I'm mostly going to have to take this one, but William, so part of the market feasibility study is identifying a revenue range based on the expected characteristics of the store and community, but it's up to us to determine whether a store would be financially viable based on further research. That is extremely well said, and that's actually where the pro forma comes in. So if you work with a pro forma analysis person, you're doing financial viability, but if they're very experienced in food co-ops, which the one that honestly there's only one or two that I can recommend, because they have that in-depth knowledge and they have to have industry knowledge, not just financial knowledge of how to build a pro forma. They're going to be looking at that with you, and they're going to be saying, well, how much deli do you expect to do or whatever, and then you got to. So yes, this is going to give you a general picture to begin from, and then building out a detailed business that can succeed, they can reach those sales. That is going to be done through the financial pro forma process. You're completely accurate. Now, I do know that I've come back to Patrick's firm. I've seen startups I was supporting or talking to come back and say, we've decided to go completely tiny grab and go, and we've dropped the kitchen. We're not going to have a deli. That's where Patrick can go, okay. And then we say, is that going to affect sales? And that's where he can give us some insight. But those decisions on what we should put in there, what we should put on our store to build the store that can do these sales, he's going to give you some containers, some hints, but that more in-depth shaping work is going to be done in the financial pro forma process and in the store design process. That was a really good question, so I didn't want to drop it. I wanted to go back actually to the go forward a slide. So the updates. Oh no,
Oh,
there was
the
the one.
update. Oh, there was a slide that I talked. Okay, here we go. How's
Yeah.
that?
So I wanted to talk about this again, make sure everyone captured this. Let's say you have a market study for this. So you've found the right site. This is the one. You've got a lease. You've got a business plan. You got the market study from Patrick or some other provider a year ago. We're good to go. And then we're about to start construction for a store that's open in a year, and a competitor opens. I just want to make sure people caught that. Like, can that make a big enough difference that they really need to? I don't know if people heard that. Like, but we would have a market study, and it's for the site we're on. And let's say we worked with Patrick, and Patrick's thumbs up, and the performance thumbs up, and everything's great. We're about to build, and then this major competitor, drops in our market or announces for our market. How much a difference can that make, Patrick? Should they stop everything and get an update?
I would get an update. It depends upon where the competitor is. And it's not just about proximity, right? Is it located in a position that can actually intercept people that are coming to your store, rather than being, in a position that people might choose to go to that store or your store. But if they have to drive past that store to get to your store, then it becomes a much stronger competitor. So there are different factors that can come into it, and sometimes we could say the competitor really shouldn't have a major impact on your sales.
Hmm.
But if your sales are going to get hit 10, 15% because of the competitor coming in, that might not mean that you stop everything and then, don't open the
I
store.
meant pause, not stop everything, but pause
Yeah,
and reassess
but
for a sec.
but but that might mean that might, but you want to make an informed decision on what to do with your store.
Mhm.
And so having those new sales numbers may allow you to make better informed decisions.
In my experience is that your provider, again, you have a market study from a provider already, a full market study. They're happy to pick up the phone and discuss and just see if it like has legs, right? Like I've had people go, "Oh my God, this little independent natural food store is opening up a branch over 2 towns over," and we're like, you know, but you're a layperson, you don't know, right? And then I've had others who said, they're across town, we'll skip it, but it was a major chain. Either way, my suggestion is pick up the phone and call your provider. And I don't say this lightly. We had a startup food co-op that was considered golden, had a great market study, I mean, everything looked like it was going to be just great. And then after they put shovels in the ground, a major competitor natural food store was going to open across town, but major competitor announced. And that ended up knocking their sales almost 20%. And they didn't decide. They're like, well, we're already building now. I'm like, because sometimes we don't want to know. But being prepared and knowing is better. And I wanted to ask you about that, Patrick, just for a second, is your marketing provider is often in the position of giving you news you'd rather not hear. And that is a tough part of their job. it doesn't mean that working with your pro forma analysis, working with your site store designer, that you can't compensate for what you hear. It's not the death knell. It's not the end of everything every time. But sometimes to prevent harm, your market study analysis job is to tell you things that are hard to hear. And I just wondered, I assume this comes up a lot in your field, and you know, if you could speak to for a moment, how well you're really thinking those things through. You're not like just going, "Let me rain on your parade."
No, no, I'm not, I don't want to rain on your parade. I want your store to open and be successful. But at the end of the day, um, it's important not just for the success of your store, but for the success of the co-op movement in general, that informed decisions be made, right? I've had people that have gotten a market study from me and then basically went and found somebody else to give them a better market study. And by better, they mean higher sales volume. And I've even heard the argument that that would help them get better grants to actually open the store. But you're not doing anybody a favor, and you're not doing your peers a favor if you open a store that is expected to do such and such dollars and it way underperforms. It's better to understand what the sales performance is going to be, because at some point, you know, if co-ops just aren't working the way that everybody says that they will be working, then it's not really good for the movement at all. So my goal is to give you the most accurate numbers possible based upon the availability of data that I have, based upon the market conditions that exist. I've also had people that have said, could our realtor come, come accompany you on your field work, or would you like to come stay at my house and, that kind of thing. And the other thing is that always meet with clients when I'm in the field, but I also do not want to get any biases along the way. I try very hard to basically remove myself from any opportunity to become biased around a particular store, because I need to be that objective third party that is assessing your market for the market, and not because I'm super excited about this food co-op that you're opening, because I don't want emotion to be part of these particular decisions, because trying to get an accurate number is just too important to the overall success of your store.
Oh, I'm
Setting the
so
right
glad you said that
expectations.
last part because I have definitely felt I've experienced it when I was first time getting market studies, and I have had startups experience. Like, well, we wanted to share everything about our co-op. We want to make sure he understands every interesting, unique aspect, and we tried to take him out to dinner, and it has felt almost people have said we felt rebuffed, like they don't even know our community because they didn't listen to us. And my experience is they will sit down and absolutely meet with you and listen to you, but that's what they're trying to avoid is that most of these providers really, really care about food co-ops and natural food stores, and they can't have emotional bias play in. So they need the information, but I love how you need the information, but emotional bias is just so prevalent in everything we do as human beings, and your job is not to involve it.
Yeah.
I really like that. We had one more question here, and it's kind of again, it's kind of more of a me question, but can a competitor locate an area where you already merely heard you had plans to put a food co-op, and kind of come in and piggyback on the market? I just want to say because it's an important question. Yes, absolutely, and it has happened. And so it's why we say that you don't announce a site until you actually have a purchase agreement or you have an actual lease, because we have absolutely seen it happen. And it feels very silly to us because like, our little market, or we would never, or maybe we've even been begging a chain to come here for years. And then all of a sudden we announce the co-op, and it isn't common, but it does happen. And we have seen that. So yes, that can happen. Um,
Can I actually speak to that for a
yeah,
second
please
too?
do.
Um, First of all, we keep these confidential, and so should you. And so
Oh yeah.
keep your market. I've seen people put these up on their websites before, and don't do that. But I've also seen instances where we've recommended locations where we said, the perfect spot to open your store is going to be at the intersection of Maine and Sussex, right? And this is going to be this is the best spot within your market to open a store. And then a couple of years later, a major competitor opens up in that exact location. That's not because we shared that location with them, but it's because other professionals working for that major competitor probably saw the same thing that we saw is that that is actually the best spot within your market, and so they may come and open it. And so sometimes I know it takes a long time, but sometimes it can be up to you to try and capture those better locations before somebody else does. So
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. And if you, FCI does have on our website, if you put in market study on the search bar on our website, we have a guide on you have a market study, now what? And it talks about how you don't share it with anyone and how city officials really will want you to. Some of you on here might be city officials. If you pay for it, fine. But you should have still have agreements with the co-op about how it's going to be utilized because we have seen well-intentioned organizations, cities, governments go, oh, but like now we have this loose information back our head when talking to Trader Joe's, and this is probably the most important thing to keep private to your co-op. And we do share in that thing. You have a market study now. What you can call from this study and share with your owners and the public. So there are things you can say for your market study, but not the whole market study. Did we miss any last questions here? Let's see. People asked about price, and so I did this one, Patrick, but I did say that $10,000 is where it should start for a full feasibility market study, and I have seen them higher, and they do go higher, and that's the bare minimum. And it depends. Ask what all they're combining. You might hear from someone, it's 25. What they mean, they're using the word feasibility study to mean market feasibility and financial. Find out. But if you're hearing a lower number, you're probably talking about a preliminary assessment. That is not a full market study. Does that feel fair?
that feels fair. And keep in mind there is some travel expense associated with this too, within the market studies. But I will adjust the price of the market study based upon the particular market. So the base light level of mine is just a little bit under 10,000, but then there's some expenses for data and then the travel.
Great. And someone did ask, can you just reiterate the definition of census tract? I think people thumbed up it. I think they found that really useful, that it was
Oh,
different when they're used to hearing, because it's not your
okay.
zip code.
No, it's not your zip code. So the Census Bureau has basically broken down the country into sort of manageable areas for data. And you'll notice that, the more population there is within that geographic region, the smaller the census tracts are going to be. But basically, these are sort of ways that the census tract will track demographic information. The Census Bureau will track demographic information. So they break the entire country up. If it's a rural area, the census tracts will be really big. And sometimes we can even break them down into smaller units. They're called block groups. But they'll be really small in an urban area. And they are just sort of uh, districts within the Census Bureau. We use census tracts because it is something that we can get demographic information from, that can help us inform your decisions. Sometimes we may change how we view a certain census tract. An example on this would be 1812, is kind of rural, but almost everybody lives closer to Loveland and not out in sort of the mountains, off to the west. And so we can take that into consideration as we're forecasting that particular census tract. But we're doing a forecast for each one of those census tracts because it is sort of a defined geographical area that we can get data on that is going to be much more precise than doing it on a zip code level or on a citywide level. So,
Great. And we had a question about, is it really worth doing a preliminary assessment if there's already serious interest in your area? And what I just said to that is you absolutely can jump to the full market study. The only reason FCI recommends the preliminary is that we have seen multiple communities have a dream, a vision of what kind of grocery store, the size, like what they're going to do, and then do multiple years of organizing and then call G2G or some other provider and find out that there's nowhere near the sales that they need to pull that off. So the preliminary is to say, we have a vision of doing X in our market. Is that even in range? Is that even vaguely possible? And I don't recommend skipping it because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that expensive. But if you're further along and you're very certain that you're going with a store in this size and everything, certainly startup food co-ops have organized for years before the preliminary market study came along. G2G actually developed the concept of the preliminary by a request from FCI. So people were doing it, but markets are just so much more volatile now. And after seeing not huge numbers, but several startups, put years of organizing work and just hit an utter brick wall when they found out they could not come anywhere near the sales needed, we recommend it. And Patrick, do you have any thoughts you want to add to that?
I would say that probably half of the clients I end up working with probably go straight to the market study
Hmm.
before the preliminary market assessment. So absolutely, it does happen. Um, I, you know, um, on the flip side of that, I will say if you're further along, if you've got a lot of members in
Hmm.
there and you're looking at sites and everything and you haven't done a preliminary market assessment, don't go backwards to the preliminary
I
market
agree with
assessment.
that.
Get a market study, and at the end of the day, we can do updates to your market study if you've got a site in mind and a facility and it's a 10,000 square foot store, and then we determine that maybe you should be looking at a 5,000 square foot store. Then you can look at another site and we can do an update, right, based on that. And I don't want to discourage anybody. I mean, there are plenty of great co-ops out there that aren't 10,000 square feet, right? So, so, but it might just be a need that you might essentially need to rethink what sites you're looking at, and then we can do an update for it.
I apologize. We actually ran a minute over. I never let that happen, but people were asking great questions. So thank you so much, Patrick, for being here and sharing with us. And again, email him directly if you want to get a copy of the PowerPoint. The video, I will send you the link for a week from Friday. You will get a direct link to the video in your email. So you can look at this again. And thank you so much, Patrick, for being here. We really
Oh,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just thank you again to all of these wonderful cooperative and natural food organizations that support this. FCI Live is free because of them. Thank you so much for supporting the movement. And today is all about business development. So we talked about market study. Hopefully, maybe you were with us this morning. We hope to learn about Business Concept 101. And then tonight, we have From Vision to Viability. This is actually a tool created by Alana Hines from the Development Corp of NCG that it helps you figure out how to apply the business co-op at your store. And so it's brand new. We're really excited about it. And so if you want to learn more about that, please join us tonight. And then tomorrow, oh, so excited. There are 5 resources in the framework of food co-op development, and one of them is trust. And it is the one that is brand new, actually, to how we look up startups within the last year or so. And it was a concept that was actually built by Dr. Angela Sales, and she is going to be here to flesh out for us exactly what we mean to trust as a resource that you must have for your business, your co-op business, to be successful. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you'll join us for some more of this series, and it will continue into Thursday this week and then Monday through Thursday next week. Thank you all so much.
Um, Thank you. Thank you.
And I am trying to stop the recording. There we go.
Okay. Well, I do notice that Marianne, I don't know if Marianne's still on the call or not.